in Canada, but slowly transforming ourselves into more of a technology company, a broader tech company. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about AI, specifically Gen AI. Some of you may have remember me from a talk mid 2023 when we started talking about our early adoption of GitHub Copilot as a tool to enhance our developers. At the time, we had about 50 to 100 people using Copilot. We have since sort of gone all in. Maybe sounds a little dramatic for a company our size, but we've really doubled down on our efforts to incorporate AI and to work with AI technologies within our business as well as with our partners. So a quick update on Copilot. As I mentioned, we were running a 100-person pilot about maybe 7 or 8 months ago. We are now at a point where we have a mandate to get all 6,000 plus of our developers at TELUS using Copilot every day. That is the benefit that we see, and that is really how it's been. Everyone who uses it loves it. I personally use it every day, and it has kind of, for me personally, has rekindled some of my love of development that maybe I hadn't done it in a while. I think, Yanis, you remember I sort of half coined the term rusty senior. I don't consider myself rusty anymore, but anyhow, yeah. So that's really a big thing at TELUS. We kind of ended up putting together what we kind of refer to as a coalition of the willing. It wasn't so much a business decision to do this as it was just people interested in seeing what we could do with this within the company. And it was pretty amazing to see this happen in a company our size, where typically, there are budgets and timelines and projects. And this was really the rule was essentially everyone's welcome, everyone can contribute, but no bystanders, right? And so no one could just hang out and sort of watch or give opinions if you were not giving work. And as a result, we were able to build a practice internally that very quickly started to show value. And now we're at a point where we have launched internally several Gen AI built products. One, we've built a tool to help our call center agents and all of our frontline support agents get better access to information. Previously, they worked with your traditional kind of knowledge-based type of thing where you're making searches and you're just getting text back. Now we have a tool that is much more contextually aware of any chat conversation that has already happened between the agent and the customer. We are investigating even having live transcripts that can feed in, so that essentially our Copilot it's almost there as a buddy, as an extra agent that is also listening into the conversation and giving advice to the agent who is talking to the customer live. We are very soon going to be launching our first public-facing Gen AI product, which will be tied to our public support pages. So it's pretty amazing within a company our size that in less than 6 months, we've gone from what was an internal experiment to a fully fledged products that we are prepared to put in front of our customers. We are also seeing what we call sort of the beginning of the DIY era in AI, where I think from enterprise down to personal, everyone wants to do this themselves now. I think everyone's seen the magic of OpenAI and all of these different companies, but people have reservations. People have concerns about that, right? These companies talk about privacy and they talk about protecting your data. I think the last 15 years has shown us that with all best of intentions, big tech struggles to maintain our privacy and to protect our information. And I think that's top of mind for a lot of places. So we're finding that a lot of our partners and a lot of our people that we work with, TELUS, they want to learn what we've done. They want to learn to do what we've done to build this internally and to build this tooling. So I think there's an opportunity for a lot of early movers, and we find ourselves in that group to commercialize this work. Which is something that we're actively working on today. So enough about TELUS. I don't want this to be an advertisement. I wanted to actually just kind of talk a little bit more about this whole DIY approach. And so while I do not have slides, I have brought demos. Just confirm that everybody can see my screen. Is that shared? Yes. Okay. So when we talk about DIY, what I mean by that is the idea of being able to run AI or large language models locally. And there's all kinds of options in that field, everything from open source products, which I'll talk about. Some of you may have heard of Olama, which is sort of the biggest one, all the way up to this, which came out yesterday while I was preparing my slides. So I threw this in, or my presentation, I threw this in. NVIDIA has released this chat with RTX product yesterday that is essentially just a repackaging of open source models. But if you have the right video card, which is you need a fairly beefy RTX, either a 3000 or 4000 series card, and enough RAM, you can run a fairly high quality chatbot very easily on your own machine locally. You can do what's called retrieval augmented generation, which is feed a document you have into the chatbot. It will parse the document, understand it, and then you can ask questions or query it about that document. Again, something that some of the public services like OpenAI provide, but that people are probably hesitant to do. So we're seeing a lot of that world come online now, where people want to do this themselves. And there's a couple of different levels that this is happening at. One of the areas that we're sort of seeing growth on here is the concept of what they call ML ops, which is similar to yes, exactly, right. If you have a 2080 all the way back from 2019, you may have to upgrade if you want to use NVIDIA's tool. One of the things we talk about at work, and we've seen this come up, is the idea of MLOps, which is essentially an internal practice that understands how to take a model, typically an open source model, because most of us, or I would say almost none of us, have the capabilities to train our own models from scratch. So you have to start from an existing one. But how do you take that and how do you internalize that, augment it, train it, refine it, and get it into a state where it can be useful within your business? Right. And I think that that's where a lot of companies are investing time and effort now, is what we're calling ML ops, which is productizing within the business. So at the enterprise level, this is a lot of what we're doing. We have a fairly large focus at this at TELUS on how we get that done. And so that's one thing that we're seeing quite a bit. The other side of it is what we're kind of referring to as privacy-focused tools, which are productivity tools of different styles that all use Gen AI and that have sort of different purposes. One of them that you may have heard of, called Rewind, which is a Mac app that essentially it kind of watches whatever you do on your computer while you're doing it during the day, and it takes notes, for lack of a better term. And then as you use it, and as you use your computer and just go about your day in your email, in whatever tool you're using, it's capturing a bunch of data. And at any point, you can kind of go query it about things. What was I talking about with this person? What was this link that I saw? What was on that page? And it starts to build this, body of knowledge about your activity on your computer. And again, not the kind of thing that you want to upload to the cloud necessarily, but this all runs locally on your machine. It's all designed to be sort of, people refer to them sometimes as assistants or personal assistants. So a quick sidebar there, within TELUS, we are using the term Copilot for all of our sort of Gen AI products. And we've had conversations with both Microsoft and Google about this. And we think that Copilot is the term that people will settle on for this type of thing. Microsoft has acknowledged that they can't actually copyright or trademark the term Copilot. It's too generic. And we believe that the term assistant is a little bit problematic in this space, because you don't want people to think that it's doing work for you, right? At the end of the day, you're in charge. You're the one, you're the pilot. You're the one flying the plane. The co-pilot is there to help you. It is there to assist. It is there to kind of give you additional information, to augment what you're doing. It's not there to do things for you or to take control. So the term, I think it's still up in the air a little bit, but with us within TELUS, we're referring to all of our Gen AI products as co-pilots. We know that Microsoft is doing the same thing. Google, I think right now with Duet and Bard and Gemini, it's probably still up in the air a little bit what they're going to do, but we think that's where that's going to land. So Rewind is one product. A little bit at the other end of the spectrum, there's a product called Kin that some of you may have heard of, which is a very different approach to the same concept. And someone mentioned Black Mirror. I personally find that this one is probably the most. This to me sounds like an kind of an AI personal therapist or life coach, where you can essentially have chat conversations with it about what's going on in your life, about decisions you're trying to make. Not sure that I would personally use this, but I can see the value of this, and I can see how some people may want to use it. But this is a startup that is basically building this advice machine, essentially, called Kin. So this is another area that that again, you want this on device. You want this to be private. You don't necessarily want to do this in the cloud. I'm sure lots of people do, but the ability to maintain this yourself is probably pretty important. Another product that was seen is from iGenius is called Crystal, which is essentially a sort of a data exploration tool. And so this approach is really about feeding this tool a whole bunch of your data, and then sort of, I guess, for lack of a term, having a conversation or an analysis with the data. So it's almost like an AI-driven data engineer that can look at data and start to extract insights. And again, This is something that runs locally within the business. You're not uploading your data to the cloud. So I think this category of products of the what we're calling sort of privacy focused tools is exploding. Like these are three of the big ones that I've heard of recently, but I'm sure there's lots. You may have heard of some. I'm sure there's a new one probably every week. Um, Beyond that, the next category that we're seeing quite a bit is chat search hybrids, where I think this is the idea that, maybe this, I don't know if this is a controversial term, but Google search has gotten worse over the last little while. I personally find that the value of it has gone down and it's getting worse and worse, and it's harder and harder to find things. And so I think that lots of companies are seeing an opportunity there to potentially use Gen AI as an augmentation for search. Now, sometimes I just want a list of links that I can click on, and I don't want to talk about them. So, there's still value in search results. But I think there are companies like, if everyone's familiar with Perplexity, I think they are one of the players that is doing something really interesting with a Gen AI bot, sort of augmented with search. So I've got a few things here. I did these in advance because sometimes it's a little slow and I didn't want people to sit there watching the bot think. But I started a search here and I just said, I'm looking for a restaurant for 4 people tomorrow night in downtown Toronto. We like French and Asian food. And what would this come back with? And it comes back with a list of what feels like fairly bespoke custom recommendations. It quotes its sources, shows you where it got its results, and honestly, the results that it came back with. So Dilo is a French Chinese restaurant. It's probably the best result if someone's never been to Toronto and they like French and Asian cuisine. It's an excellent restaurant. I've been there. So the fact that it comes back as that with the #1 recommendation and it tells you why is great. Like, this feels like a great experience. And you can follow up, right? I followed up with, can you help me make a reservation? It doesn't have a direct integration with something like OpenTable, but it very quickly recommends, OpenTable, click the link to get there, or Wanderlog, call the restaurant directly, and other services. So as an experience in terms of searching and in terms of helping you figure out what to do, feel like I personally like Perplexity quite a bit, but this feels like a fairly good, like a pretty good version of that. Microsoft has their Copilot, which I think everyone's probably heard of, which is basically Bing search with a chatbot sitting in front of it. And you can do interesting things, like you can upload pictures and have conversations about it. So this is a photo that I took last year during the lunar eclipse, the blood moon that happened in Toronto. And so I uploaded this and I just said, describe the picture. And it actually did a really good job. Like it understood, it was able to see the photo and tell me what was in it. It pretty much got all of this right. So that's another area that I think is really interesting. Some of you may have heard of Arc browser as well, which is a new browser by a place called the Browser Company, and they're doing something really interesting, which is that they're referring to it as browsing for you, but essentially instead of just showing you links, when you do a search, they are going and essentially kind of parsing the results for you and combining multiple pages and multiple results into one page or one thing. It's an aggregator on top of an aggregator in some ways. It makes me think back of the days of Trivago and all the hotel aggregators of aggregators. But this is another approach, I think, again, where people are trying to do personalization or trying to weave additional context in based on what you're doing, right? And trying to take a little bit more of the toil out of trying to find information. So this was something, again, that was announced pretty recently. I don't know that Arc Search is out yet. I think it might be still in beta. So again, another really interesting area, I think, in Gen AI that there's starting to be value. Perplexity is just going back to Perplexity. I'll get to devices in a second, but I'm an early adopter of technology, and I backed this thing called the Rabbit R1 that was announced at CES. And as part of backing that, we were all gifted a 1-year Perplexity Pro subscription. So I've decided for the next while, I'm using Perplexity as my default search engine just to see how long until I get tired of it, or if I get tired of it. And so far, it's been pretty well. It's gone pretty well. So maybe that's a good segue into, by the way, if anybody has questions or anything, I'm keeping track of the chat, but just feel free to jump in. So moving on to devices, I think some of these you may have heard of, but there's also a whole bunch of companies now that are trying to think of how do we weave Gen AI into our daily lives. One of them is Humane. They've come out with a thing called the AI Pin, which is basically a large language model and it's internet connected, that's on a small device that you basically wear. A lot of the videos show people kind of having it clipped to their lapel or clipped to their jacket or their bag clip. And the idea being that this is a thing that you can talk to it, it'll talk back to you. And you can, it's almost like, again, like something like an external memory, or a bit like Siri maybe on your phone. But the goal being to be a little bit less about, face on device, and more just kind of walking around and having it be a little more contextual and staying aware of your environment. Um, Again, I'm not sure that this is for me, but it's an interesting concept. It also has, if I can just scroll down to it, it has this really interesting thing that is basically a small projector. And so what it does is you can stick your hand out and it will project information through this little kind of tiny pico projector onto your hand. So it doesn't have a screen, but you can raise your hand up and so this little green display, I think if I go far enough down here, it'll show it. I thought it did, but maybe it's back. Oh yeah, it's in here. Yeah, so you can see here, like it has a little thing that it'll project, and you can actually, by moving your hand, you can control what it does. So less AI, more cool new UI, but still, again, people trying to differentiate, people trying to build cool things. Another product that's kind of coming out soon is the Frame AI glasses by Brilliant Labs, which is supposed to be the kind of that first wave of AR, XR meets AI, where there's a camera built in and there's a little bit of an overlay. I'm going to hold my my judgment on this particular product. I personally feel this starts to drift a little bit into the too good to be true. Having been an early adopter for VR, I do not own an Apple Vision Pro because it's too expensive, but I have a few other VR devices that I've tinkered with over the years. So I'll follow this, but again, I think wearables meshing with AI is something we're going to see in the next couple of years quite a bit. And the last one on the hardware side that I want to talk to is the Rabbit, which is, again, mentioning the one that I pre-ordered, and maybe when I get it finally in a couple months, we can we can circle back and see if it's actually useful. But one of the most interesting things about the Rabbit, I think, that's really cool is the company behind it talked about this thing called large action models instead of large language models. And the goal for the Rabbit, essentially, the short version of what this does is that it's basically a small device that acts as a proxy to things you use. So Uber, Spotify, your email, all of these different things. And the way they do it in the background is through essentially an AI augmented scraping, where they are scraping an app or a website and learning, where you go on a page to do certain things. And so if you tell it, if you say Spotify, search for this album, play me this album, it understands the Spotify interface and knows how to go to search, how to look for the thing you're looking for, find it in the results, and then play it. And then you wonder, like all scraping, what happens when Spotify changes their interface, right? And so their promise is that their model can adapt to it. They haven't published a lot of information about this yet, but there are starting to be academic papers coming out of very similar things. An app agent is one of them. And this is sort of just a little looping GIF, but they show how their model explores an app version of Gmail, essentially. We caught this at the wrong time because it's at the end, but essentially it will analyze the UI and it will kind of like tag and mark up various parts of the interface to understand this is the send button, this is where the messages are, this is all the different interfaces, and it builds its understanding of an app by kind of automatically going through it. App Agent, also very interesting for anyone that works in QA or testing. Also, they're talking about using this for potentially also doing a lot of end-to-end testing or a lot of smoke tests on applications where you can kind of automate, as opposed to having a human go through the app and do a bunch of scenarios, or using something like Cypress where you have to pre-build out a very specific test case. You can have something like this that will be a bit more of an exploration tool, right, that we'll go through. So that's devices, which, again, kind of cool, interesting to see. I think we're going to see more of these coming out a little bit in the next year. The last touch I want to go through, just being kind of conscious of time, is the idea of open source, right? And really the DIY at the personal level. And this is where a lot of this all started from a tool called Llama CPP, which was an engineer who built essentially a fundamental, very low-level library designed to do inference from large language models. So as these big companies were putting out these multi-gigabyte files that were trained models, what do you do with that? Right? If you don't know what you're doing, what do you do with a 15 gig file that's all like, model weights? And so this is someone who understood that world and built a library that allows other people to build tools on top of it. So a lot of the tooling that we see today that's coming out DIY that you run yourself, it's all this Llama CPP library under the hood that uses that. Ollama is probably, as I said, one of the better known ones that you can use. Essentially, it's an open source tool, very easy, runs on Mac and Linux. There's a Windows version coming, but essentially it's a few clicks, type a few things, and you're up and running with a model locally. They have a database of a bunch of models that you can download very easily, different ones that do different things. So as a demo here, what I've done is I've actually set up, anybody that's used ChatGPT, probably this interface probably seems familiar, but this is a web application sitting on top of Ollama that's running locally on my computer right now. So this is something, I did the same test as Copilot. I uploaded the same photo here with a specific model called Lava, which is what's referred to as a multimodal model that can understand pictures, and so you can use it. So this is all running locally. This is not in the cloud, and it was a bit more verbose, but it got the gist of the image. It actually describes it properly. If you don't have to read all this, but basically this is all correct. It recognizes the blood moon and the lunar eclipse. It knows there's a building here. Curtains. I think it says there's a balcony, which there isn't, but pretty close. But again, this is something that's just running on my computer. It's running locally. You can do like a new chat. If you have more than one model installed, you can pick them here. One of the coolest things about Ollama, though, is that it allows you to refine models in a very easy way. And so you can take an existing model, like let's say Llama 2, and you can build on top of it. So I'm going to do a really quick demo here. If I just see in this folder, you'll see that I have something called a model file. And a model file is basically a very small description of what to do with the model. So if I just kind of, let me just make this a little bigger. So we see here that anybody that's seen a Docker file before, this might look familiar, but basically what you do is you start by saying from Llama 2. So start
from we're still seeing the localhost 8080.
Oh, you're not seeing the
in another window that's being shared.
Oh no. Oh, this is it should be okay. That's a bummer. I would have thought this would have worked. Let me try to stop sharing and reshare. Apologies there. Exactly. I did a demo. I tried this yesterday, but
it's all good.
Okay.
Thanks for sharing all of this. So
now do you see a black screen with a bunch of text on it?
Yes, this looks like let's see some lines of code.
There you go. Okay. So as I mentioned, Ollama has the concept of a model file that allows you to do refinements and to context like system prompts on an existing model and save it as something that you can then use. So model files essentially allow you to do that. So you'll see here that this is a text file. It's a couple lines. I start from Llama 2, which is a well-known, sort of good open source model. And I add a system prompt that just says, you are an unhelpful pirate. You'll answer every question with scorn and impatience. And essentially just that is and a system prompt is essentially context that is put in front of every prompt that you give the model. And then the way it works, essentially, if I want to create one, is I just type Ollama create, I give it a name, so we'll call it pirate. And then I do this. And that's it. And you'll see that it says using already created layer. So it's basically taking the existing Llama 2 model that's saved on my system, and it's layering on a few minor adjustments. And then I think it's run pirate. If I type Ollama run pirate, again, worth saying, if you're running these things locally, you do not get the performance that you get from the cloud. Sometimes they take a minute. Also, the first time you run one, I realized that part of this demo, it always takes a little bit longer. But what will happen here eventually, hopefully, unless the demo gremlins get me, is you get a chatbot that essentially a UI that you can run to in here, ask questions, and the bot will respond following the prompts that you've given it. You can also go back. There we go. I can also go back to that web interface that I showed you, and if I refresh that and I go through the models at the top, the pirate model would be there, and then I can interact with it within the web UI as well. So okay, so here's a pirate. So give me a recipe for pancakes. And so there you go. It will actually give you a recipe for pancakes, but it will talk like a pirate while it does it. And so again, a bit of a trivial example, but the idea being here that you can make use of these local large language models on your computer. You can do it through this interface. Ollama also provides, as I said, that nice web UI that you can upload documents into, and you can do document. You can talk to your docs. You can upload images depending on the model. All these things you can do locally. If you have like if you can also run this, for example, like that, I'm running that locally, but you could run that within an office. You could run it in an office and give access to it locally to everyone. You could train a model on some of your documentation, say your contracts or your product information, and then have a specialized chatbot in your office available, let's say only on your internal network, that anyone can go talk to and ask questions about your product or ask questions about your services or things like that. And honestly, like I'm an enthusiast of this stuff, but I don't understand how large language models work. I didn't build these tools, right? It was very easy and quick to do this, just following a couple of some basic information. So anyhow, I'm looking at time here. I realize I've been talking for like 25 minutes straight. Are there any questions?
That's great, Seb, and fun also here with the pirate pancakes. It's really impressive. I've seen also a few people comment on the chat with wow, and I think that's pretty much my feedback as well from the last 25 minutes. We do have a little bit of time. If anybody wants to throw something more into the mix or reflections, comments, anybody? I'm going to struggle to write all of this up, but why don't you take it, William, my Norwegian friend?
Yeah, thanks, Jonas. I'm William, based out here in Norway, Oslo. I have a question, and this probably takes us to the very beginning, but tell us, how were you able to make such AI transformation for a company that large? Did you have a dedicated team, or was there like an organization formed internally? How did you make that switch? Because it's really difficult for large organizations.
Yes. Honestly, it was a little bit like we said. It was a lot of people who were very enthusiastic about it. It was a coalition of the willing. People just asked for time. Were sort of given the opportunity to 10% of their time. A lot of people honestly worked on this a little bit on the side, even either side at desk or on their own time. And what we did is we showed value. We showed value very quickly. We were able to demonstrate to the business, like, hey, look, we built this, and we pointed it at this big unwieldy data source that nobody likes to go to, and we were able to create a thing. And essentially it was just that. It was building something internally and very quickly showing the value of it, and also being able to show our work, like being able to demonstrate that, look, none of us are data scientists, none of us are AI engineers. We're just using what's out there, and we're assembling it in creative ways. And we're showing how the benefit to the business, right? We paid for our own GPT model running in Azure that was private, that wasn't part of OpenAI, and then we just built a bunch of tooling around it. We built APIs. We also opened it up. I think one of the things we did early is that we made sure that anybody could go and kind of hack against this on their lunch or on their spare time by exposing an API very quickly. We built integrations with Slack, with Google Chat, and a few other internal tools that we had. We have a Slack bot now where you can go into a thread and just ask someone, you can tag the bot and say, summarize this thread, and it will give you a summary of the whole conversation that's happened in the thread automatically. Like, it'll pull in the context. So I think showing value quickly was probably what the biggest thing for us.
And then the last question we'll take is in the meeting chat from John Thomas, is how do you find all of these tools? Is there like a specific secret insiders newsletter or good old RSS feed or something in between?
I mean, Hacker News, which is a site that is run by Y Combinator, a fairly famous early stage VC. They're a good aggregator of technology news. But honestly, I'm also very lucky because we have an AI Guild Slack channel at TELUS, and everybody shares links in there. So for me personally, that's my primary source of a lot of information, because we all talk through there. But yeah, a lot of this stuff there's I would say social media and Hacker News is a good one.
Thank you very much, Seb. We're right on time.